The laboratory was quiet that Tuesday morning. Dr. Hayun arrived early, as she always did. She liked the silence before her colleagues came in. It gave her time to think, to prepare for the day's experiments. The Seoul Advanced Research Institute was one of the best places in the world for quantum physics research. Hayun felt lucky to work there. She walked through the main lab, her footsteps echoing on the clean white floor. The machines hummed softly around her. Screens showed numbers and graphs that most people would not understand, but Hayun understood them perfectly. She had spent 10 years studying quantum physics. 5 of those years were spent right here, in this lab, trying to understand the mysteries of time and space. Today's experiment was supposed to be routine. They were testing a new particle accelerator, a machine that made tiny particles move very fast. The goal was to observe how these particles behaved at extreme speeds. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. Just another day of collecting data and writing reports. Hayun put on her white lab coat and tied her hair back. She checked the equipment one more time. Everything looked normal. The computer screens glowed with ready status. The safety systems were all green. She smiled to herself. Maybe today would finally give them the results they needed. At 8 o'clock, her colleague Jiwon arrived. He was a young researcher, fresh from university but very smart. He carried 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one for Hayun. "Good morning, Doctor," Jiwon said with a bright smile. "Ready for another exciting day of watching particles spin?" Hayun took the coffee gratefully. "Thank you, Jiwon, and yes, I am ready. Though I hope today will be more than just watching. I hope we will actually see something new." They started the experiment at 9. Hayun pressed the button to begin the sequence. The particle accelerator started its work. Deep underground, in a circular tunnel 3 kilometers long, particles began to race at incredible speeds. On the screens above, numbers began to change rapidly. Graphs showed lines moving up and down. "Everything looks good," Jiwon said, watching his monitor. "Temperature is stable. Energy levels are normal. No anomalies detected." Hayun nodded, but she kept her eyes on her own screen. Something felt different today. She could not explain it. Just a feeling in her gut, the kind scientists were not supposed to trust. But after 10 years in this field, Hayun had learned that sometimes feelings mattered. Then it happened. A red light flashed on her console. A warning alarm began to beep. Hayun's heart jumped. "Wait," she said quickly. "Something is wrong with the magnetic field." Jiwon leaned closer to his screen. "I see it too. The field is fluctuating. Should we shut down?" Hayun reached for the emergency stop button. But before her finger could touch it, the lights in the laboratory flickered. Every machine made a strange humming sound all at once. The air felt heavy like before a thunderstorm. And then Hayun's hand stopped moving. No, that was not right. Her hand did not stop. Everything else stopped. She could still move. She could still think. But Jiwon stood frozen beside her, his mouth half open, about to say something. The coffee cup in his hand was tilted, and brown liquid poured out of it. But the liquid did not fall. It hung in the air like a photograph, like time itself had been captured and held still. Hayun's breath caught in her throat. This was impossible. Completely impossible. Time did not stop. Time was a constant, always moving forward. That was basic physics. That was reality. But here she stood, able to move in a world that was not moving. She waved her hand in front of Jiwon's face. He did not blink. She touched his arm. It felt warm but completely rigid, like a statue. "This cannot be real," she whispered. Her voice sounded strange in the absolute silence. Even the usual hum of the machines had stopped. Then she saw it. At first, Hayun thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. There was something in the laboratory. Something that should not be there. Something huge. It was coiled around the particle accelerator like a massive snake, but it was not a snake. It had 4 legs, each ending in sharp claws. It had a long neck and a head shaped like a triangle. Wings folded against its body, shimmered with colors that Hayun had never seen before. Colors that she did not think existed in nature. A dragon. There was a dragon in her laboratory. Hayun wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She could only stand there and stare at the impossible creature before her. The dragon's scales reflected light in ways that hurt to look at. They seemed to shift and change, showing depths that went on forever. Its eyes were large and golden, with pupils that looked almost human. Those eyes were looking right at her. The creature moved its head, studying her with clear intelligence. Hayun realized with a shock that this was not some mindless beast. This thing was thinking. It was aware. It knew she was there. Slowly, carefully, Hayun took a step backward. The dragon watched but did not move. Its massive body remained coiled around the accelerator, perfectly still. Only its eyes followed her movement. "What are you?" Hayun finally managed to whisper. The dragon tilted its head like a bird examining something curious. Its mouth opened slightly, showing teeth that looked like they were made of crystal. But it did not make a sound. Dragons did not exist. They were myths, stories told to children. Yet here one was, real and solid, existing in a moment where time itself had stopped. Hayun looked around the frozen laboratory. Ji-won was still frozen mid-sentence. The coffee was still suspended in mid-air. The screen still showed the same numbers, unchanging. Everything was caught in this impossible moment. Everything except her and this creature. Her scientific mind began to work again, pushing past the fear. If time had stopped, then this creature existed outside of normal time. It lived in the spaces between moments, the gaps that humans could not normally see. The particle accelerator must have done something, created some kind of bridge between normal reality and wherever this dragon came from. "You exist outside of time," Hayun said, more to herself than to the dragon. "That is why we never detected you before. You are always there, but we cannot see you when time is moving normally." The dragon's golden eyes seemed to brighten, as if pleased that she understood. It uncoiled slightly, its movements graceful despite its enormous size. Hayun estimated it was at least 20 meters long from nose to tail. Its wings, even folded, would span the entire width of the laboratory if opened. She took another step closer, her fear giving way to curiosity. This was the discovery of a lifetime, of 1,000 lifetimes, proof that reality was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. If she could find a way to communicate with this creature, to understand it, the implications would change everything humanity knew about the universe. The dragon watched her approach with those knowing eyes. And Hayun realized something else. This was not a chance encounter. The dragon was not surprised to see her. It had been waiting for humans to reach this point, to develop technology advanced enough to glimpse what lay beyond the normal flow of time. This was first contact, not with aliens from another planet, but with beings from another layer of reality entirely. And somehow, impossibly, Hayun had become humanity's first ambassador to a world that existed between the ticks of a clock. Hayun stood perfectly still, barely breathing. The dragon's golden eyes stayed fixed on her. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat loud in the eerie silence of the frozen laboratory. Time had stopped for everything except her and this impossible creature. The dragon moved its head closer to her. Hayun fought the urge to step back. She was a scientist. Fear had no place here. This was an opportunity that would never come again. She needed to be brave. She needed to understand. Then something happened that Hayun would never forget. The dragon did not speak with words. Instead, images appeared in her mind. Not pictures exactly, more like pure information, translated directly into her thoughts. It was the strangest sensation she had ever experienced. Mathematical equations filled her consciousness. Beautiful, complex formulas that she somehow understood instantly. They explained the structure of time, the nature of reality, the hidden dimensions that existed alongside the three that humans could see. It was like learning a new language and becoming fluent in seconds. Hayun gasped and grabbed the edge of a desk to steady herself. The information kept coming. The dragon was teaching her, showing her truths that human science had not yet discovered. And with the knowledge came a name or something like a name, a concept, a purpose, temporal guardian. That was what this creature was. Not a dragon, though it looked like one. A guardian, a being that existed to watch over the flow of time itself. And it was not alone. There were others like it, many others living in the spaces between moments. Humanity had simply never been able to see them before. "Why can I see you now?" Hayun asked out loud. Why has time stopped? More information flooded into her mind. The particle accelerator had created a tiny tear in the fabric of space-time. Not dangerous, not destructive. Just enough to give Hayun a glimpse through the veil. Enough to let her exist for a moment in the same state as the guardian, between the ticks of the clock. Outside the normal flow, Ha-Yun pulled her notebook from her pocket with shaking hands. She began to write frantically, trying to capture everything she was learning. The equations, the concepts, the revolutionary ideas about reality that were pouring into her mind. Her pen moved across the paper so fast that her handwriting was barely readable. The Guardian watched patiently as she worked. There was something almost kind in its gaze, Ha-Yun thought. Like a teacher watching a student grasp a difficult concept for the first time. Time is not what we think it is, Ha-Yun muttered as she wrote. It is not a river flowing in one direction. It is more like a tapestry, threads woven together, multiple dimensions, multiple possibilities all existing at once. The Guardian sent her a feeling of approval. She was understanding. That was good. That was what it had hoped for. Then a new image came to Ha-Yun. This one made her stop writing. It showed Earth from space, beautiful and blue, and around it, invisible to human eyes, were countless Guardians. Some looked like dragons. Others had different shapes that Ha-Yun could not quite comprehend. They had been there for millions of years, watching and waiting for what? Ha-Yun wondered. The answer came immediately. Waiting for humanity to reach this point. Waiting for humans to develop technology sophisticated enough to detect the temporal dimensions. Waiting for first contact. You have been watching us all along, Ha-Yun said slowly. Watching our species grow and develop. Waiting to see if we would make it this far. Another surge of information. Yes, the Guardians had been watching. They watched many species across many worlds. Most never developed the capability to see beyond normal space-time. Most stayed locked in their three-dimensional understanding of reality. But humans were different. Humans were special. The Guardian showed Ha-Yun images of human history. Ancient people looking at the stars and wondering. Early scientists making the first crude telescopes. Newton discovering gravity. Einstein explaining relativity. Each step brought humanity closer to understanding the true nature of the universe. Each generation built on the work of the last. And now, finally, humanity had reached the threshold. The particle accelerator in Seoul was just the first step. Other labs around the world would soon make similar discoveries. The veil was thinning. Soon more humans would be able to see what Ha-Yun was seeing right now. What happens next? Ha-Yun asked. Her hand had stopped writing. The notebook was full of equations and notes, but she needed to hear this answer directly. The Guardian's golden eyes dimmed slightly. The next images were darker, more serious. They showed other worlds, other species that had reached this same point in their development. Some of those species had welcomed the knowledge. They had learned to work with the temporal dimensions, to live in harmony with the greater reality. Those species thrived and grew, becoming part of something larger than themselves. But other species had failed. Some destroyed themselves with the new knowledge, using it to create weapons or to manipulate time in dangerous ways. Others were destroyed by entities that feared their potential. Not all beings in the temporal dimensions were as peaceful as the Guardians. Some saw emerging species as threats. Some wanted to eliminate competition before it could grow strong. Ha-Yun felt a chill run down her spine. You are saying we are in danger. By discovering this, by seeing you, we have put our entire species at risk. The Guardian sent a feeling that was neither yes nor no. It was more complex than that. Yes, there was danger. But there was also opportunity. Earth had already been noticed. The quantum experiments that human scientists had been running for the past decade had created ripples across the temporal dimensions. Other entities knew about humanity now. The question was not whether humans would face challenges, but whether they would face them prepared or unprepared. And you want to help us prepare, Ha-Yun said. It was not a question. She could feel the Guardian's intentions clearly now. That is why you revealed yourself to me. That is why you are sharing this knowledge. Affirmation flowed through her mind. The Guardians believed in humanity. They had watched humans overcome countless challenges throughout history. Wars, diseases, natural disasters. Every time humanity adapted. Every time, humans found creative solutions to impossible problems. The Guardians believed that humans had the potential to not just survive the coming trials, but to excel at them. Ha-Yun looked at the frozen laboratory around her. At Jiwon, still caught mid-sentence. At the coffee hanging impossibly in the air. At the screens showing unchanging numbers. This moment would end soon. Time would start flowing again, and she would have to explain what had happened. She would have to convince others that what she experienced was real. But first, she needed to make a choice. The Guardian was offering humanity an alliance. Protection, guidance, and knowledge in exchange for cooperation. Help preparing for what was coming. But accepting that help meant accepting the responsibility that came with it. It meant acknowledging that Earth was no longer isolated, no longer safe in its ignorance. If I say yes, Hayun asked carefully, what exactly are you offering? What would this alliance mean? The Guardian showed her visions of the future. Not a certain future, but possibilities. Human scientists working with knowledge provided by the Guardians. Technology advancing by leaps instead of small steps. Understanding of the universe expanding far beyond current limitations. And most importantly, humanity standing ready when the test came, ready to prove their worth to a cosmos that was far more crowded and complex than anyone had imagined. Hayun closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was too big a decision for one person to make. This affected all of humanity. But there was no time to consult with others. Time itself was running out. She could feel it at the edges of her awareness. The frozen moment could not last forever. Soon the normal flow would resume and this opportunity would be gone. She thought about her colleagues, about Jiwon and Doyun and all the other brilliant minds she worked with. She thought about humanity as a whole, about the creativity and determination that had brought her species from caves to quantum laboratories, about the potential that still lay untapped. Hayun opened her eyes and looked directly at the Guardian. Yes, she said firmly. We accept your help. Humanity accepts this alliance. The Guardian's eyes blazed with golden light. Approval and satisfaction radiated from it. Around the laboratory, Hayun could feel reality beginning to shift. The frozen moment was ending. Time was starting to move again. The Guardian sent one final message. A promise. It would be watching. When Hayun needed guidance, it would provide subtle signs. The alliance was sealed now. Humanity would not face its cosmic trials alone. Then all at once time resumed. The coffee from Ji-won's cup splashed onto the floor. The machines hummed back to life. The screens updated with new numbers, and the dragon vanished, as if it had never been there at all. Ji-won stared at the coffee spilled on the floor. He looked confused. What just happened? 1 second I was pouring coffee and now it is all over the floor. Did I black out? Hayun opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. How could she explain what she had just experienced? How could she make anyone believe that time had stopped, that she had met a dragon from beyond reality, that humanity had just entered an alliance with beings from another dimension? She looked down at her notebook. The pages were full of equations and diagrams, physical proof that something had happened. Her hands were still shaking slightly. Ji-won, she said slowly, something extraordinary just occurred. I need you to listen carefully and try to keep an open mind. She spent the next hour explaining everything, the frozen time, the Guardian, the mathematical knowledge that had been shared with her. Ji-won listened without interrupting, though his expression grew more skeptical with each sentence. When she finished, he looked at her with concern. Dr. Hayun, he said gently, maybe you should rest. The equipment malfunction might have released some radiation or chemicals. You might be experiencing hallucinations. Hayun had expected this reaction. She pushed her notebook toward him. Look at these equations. I did not know this mathematics before today. No human knows this mathematics yet. But it is all here, complete and correct. Check it yourself. Ji-won picked up the notebook reluctantly. His eyes scanned the pages, and slowly, his expression changed. Skepticism turned to confusion, then to wonder, then to fear. This is revolutionary. This math describes temporal mechanics in ways we have never seen. But how could you possibly? I told you how, Hayun said firmly. I know it sounds impossible. But the proof is right there in your hands. Over the next few days, Hayun met with the Institute's director, Dr. Minho. He was an older man, experienced and wise, but also cautious. He listened to her story with a serious expression. Then he looked at her equations for a long time. This could change everything we know about physics, Minho said finally. But Hayun, you must understand how this sounds. Dragons? Beings that exist outside time? It is difficult to accept. I know, Hayun replied. I would not believe it either if I had not experienced it myself. But Director, we cannot ignore this. The Guardian said that other entities are aware of us now. Some of them are not friendly. We need to prepare. Minho tapped his fingers on his desk, thinking, if what you say is true, then this is not just a scientific matter. This is a matter of planetary security. We need to inform the government. We need to inform other countries. Yes, Ha-Yun agreed. But first, we need to continue our experiments. We need to learn how to interact with the temporal dimensions deliberately. The Guardian gave me knowledge, but we need to understand how to apply it. Minho nodded slowly. Very well. I will authorize expanded experiments. But Ha-Yun, be careful. If dangerous entities really are watching us, we do not want to attract their attention too quickly. Over the following months, Ha-Yun and her team worked day and night. They used the equations she had received to build new equipment, devices that could detect temporal anomalies, machines that could create controlled tiers in the fabric of space-time. The work was difficult and often frustrating, but they made steady progress. Ji-won became her most dedicated assistant. After seeing the mathematics, he was completely convinced. He brought in another researcher named Do-Yoon, a specialist in quantum mechanics. Do-Yoon was younger than both of them, barely 30 but brilliant. When he heard the story and saw the equations, his reaction was immediate excitement. This is what I got into science for, Do-Yoon said, grinning widely. To discover impossible things and make them possible. When do we start? The team grew. More scientists joined the project as word spread quietly through the institute. Soon they had a dozen people working together, all sworn to secrecy. The government knew, of course. Officials visited regularly, asking questions and offering resources. Other countries began reaching out, wanting to collaborate. True to its word, the Guardian provided subtle guidance. Sometimes Ha-Yun would wake up with new ideas fully formed in her mind. Other times, experiments would fail in ways that pointed them toward better approaches. The help was gentle, never overwhelming, always teaching rather than simply giving answers. 6 months after the first contact, they achieved a breakthrough. They created a stable temporal window, a small portal that allowed them to observe the space between moments. Through the window they could see the Guardians, dozens of them moving through the temporal dimensions like fish through water. The sight was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But they also saw other things. Entities that did not look friendly, dark shapes that moved with predatory grace, beings that seemed to be made of pure energy, crackling with power. These creatures noticed the portal and moved toward it, curious or perhaps hostile. Ha-Yun quickly shut the portal down. We are attracting attention, Do-Yoon said nervously. Those things, whatever they were, they saw us. Good, Ha-Yun replied, though her heart was racing. The Guardian said other entities already know about us. Better that we learn to detect them now while we are still preparing, than be surprised later. News of their progress spread through the scientific community. Labs in America, Europe, China, and Russia began their own temporal research programs. The Korean Institute shared Ha-Yun's equations freely. This was not about national pride or competition. This was about species survival. Everyone needed to be ready for what was coming. The pace of discovery was incredible. Within a year, humans had learned more about temporal mechanics than they had learned about quantum physics in a century. The Guardian had been right. Humans were remarkably good at understanding these concepts. Once given the initial knowledge, human scientists ran with it, making connections and discoveries that even surprised the Guardians. Ha-Yun sometimes felt the Guardian's presence during her work. Not direct communication like that first time, but a sense of approval, a feeling that humanity was progressing well, that the Alliance was working as hoped. Then, 18 months after first contact, the warning came. Ha-Yun was in the laboratory late one evening, working alone. Suddenly she felt a familiar sensation. The air grew heavy. Time began to slow, not stopping completely this time, but moving like thick syrup. She looked up and saw the Guardian materialize in front of her. Its golden eyes held urgency. Images, flooded into Ha-Yun's mind faster and more intense than before. She saw hostile entities gathering in the temporal dimensions. She saw them observing Earth with cold interest. She saw them beginning to move toward humanity's reality. The test was coming. Sooner than expected. Much sooner. The hostile entities had decided that humanity was advancing too quickly, that humans were becoming a potential threat. They were coming to evaluate Earth, to determine whether humanity should be allowed to continue developing, or whether they needed to be eliminated now, before they became too powerful. When? Ha-Yun asked aloud, her voice shaking. When are they coming? The Guardian showed her a calendar. 1 month. Humanity had 1 month to prepare for a test that would determine the fate of the entire species. 1 month to get ready for an encounter with beings that could manipulate time itself. 1 month to prove that humans deserved their place in the greater cosmos. Ha-Yun's hands clenched into fists. 1 month was not much time, but it would have to be enough. Humanity had come too far to fail now. They had learned too much, grown too fast, accomplished too much in just 18 months. They would face this test, whatever it was, and they would pass it. They had to. The alternative was extinction. The Guardian sent one more message before fading away. A feeling of confidence, of belief. The Guardians thought humanity could succeed. They had seen something in humans that made them worth defending. Ha-Yun just hoped that confidence was not misplaced. Time returned to normal. Ha-Yun immediately grabbed her phone and started making calls. Minho first, then the other team leaders. Everyone needed to know. Everyone needed to prepare. The cosmic trial was coming, ready or not. As she spoke to Minho, explaining the urgent warning, Ha-Yun looked out the laboratory window at the Seoul skyline. Millions of people out there, living their normal lives, completely unaware that their existence might end in 30 days. The weight of responsibility felt crushing, but she pushed the fear aside. Fear would not help. Only action would help now. We will be ready, she said, more to herself than to Minho. We will show them what humanity can do. The next morning, scientists from around the world gathered in Seoul for an emergency meeting. Ha-Yun stood before them, her face projected on screens in laboratories across 6 continents. She explained the warning from the Guardian. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A researcher from America spoke first. 1 month is not enough time. We have made progress, yes, but we are still learning the basics. How can we possibly prepare for a test from beings who have mastered temporal mechanics? We do not have a choice, replied a scientist from Japan. We work with the time we have. What other option is there? Ha-Yun raised her hand for quiet. The Guardian believes we can succeed. It has watched many species face this test. Some failed, yes, but the Guardian thinks humans are different. It thinks we have something special. We need to trust that judgment and focus on preparation. Director Minho stood up. We need to share everything we know. All research, all data, all theories. No more secrets between labs. No more competition. From today we work as one unified team. Humanity as a single entity. The proposal was unanimous. Within hours, secure networks linked every major research facility. Scientists began working around the clock, sharing discoveries instantly. A researcher in Moscow would have an idea at midnight. Scientists in California would build on it by morning. Teams in Beijing would test it by afternoon. The pace of progress was astounding. Ha-Yun's team in Seoul became the coordination center. Ji-won managed the data flow, ensuring everyone had access to the latest findings. Doyen led the experimental teams, pushing the boundaries of what their equipment could do. A new member joined them, a brilliant engineer named Hyejin who specialized in quantum mechanics and temporal theory. Hyejin was in her late 20s, small and quiet, but with a mind that worked like lightning. She looked at Ha-Yun's equations and immediately began designing new devices. If we can detect temporal dimensions, she said, then we can learn to navigate them. And if we can navigate them, we can defend ourselves. Another key team member was Junho, a physicist from Busan. He was older than the others, with gray hair and tired eyes, but his experience proved invaluable. He had spent 40 years studying theoretical physics. The Guardian's equations made sense to him in ways that younger scientists struggled with. The hostile entities will test our understanding, Junho explained during one late-night session. Not our weapons, not our technology. Our comprehension. They want to see if we truly understand what we have discovered or if we are just copying without learning. So we need to really understand, Doyun said. Not just memorize the equations, but grasp the concepts behind them. Exactly, Junho confirmed. And that is actually good news. Understanding is what humans do best. We do not just learn rules. We ask why. We see patterns. We make intuitive leaps. The Guardian occasionally provided subtle hints. Hayun would find herself drawn to certain equations for no logical reason. Experiments would fail in ways that suggested new directions. The help was never direct, never overwhelming. The Guardian was a teacher, not doing the work for them but guiding them toward their own discoveries. 2 weeks into the preparation, they achieved something remarkable. Heejin's new device successfully created a small temporal bubble. Inside the bubble, time moved at a different rate than outside. They could make a second last an hour, or compress an hour into a second. The applications were enormous. This changes everything, Jiwon said, staring at the readings in amazement. We can give ourselves more time to work. We can slow down threats or speed up our responses. This is incredible, but Hayun remained cautious. Remember, the entities we will face can do this too. Probably better than us. This is a tool, yes, but not a weapon. We still need to understand the deeper principles. The international cooperation was beautiful to witness. Countries that had been rivals for centuries worked side by side. Resources flowed freely across borders. The best minds on Earth focused on a single goal. Governments set aside politics. Military forces offered support without seeking advantage. Humanity was truly united for the first time in history. 3 weeks into preparation, they detected the first signs. Ripples in the temporal dimensions. Something massive was moving toward Earth's reality. The hostile entities were coming, right on schedule. The team went into overdrive, working without sleep, pushing themselves beyond normal limits. Hayun barely left the laboratory. She survived on coffee and determination. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her colleagues looked no better. But none of them complained. They all understood what was at stake. The Guardian appeared one more time, 4 days before the test. Hayun was alone in the lab again, reviewing equations. Time slowed, and the magnificent dragon materialized before her. "Are we ready?" Hayun asked simply. The Guardian sent feelings and images. Humanity had progressed faster than expected. The speed of learning was exceptional. The level of cooperation was remarkable. Most species took decades to reach where humans had reached in 18 months. Most species never achieved the kind of global unity that Earth was demonstrating. But ready? That was harder to answer. The test would be difficult. The hostile entities were powerful and would not make things easy. They wanted to eliminate threats, not welcome new members to the cosmic community. They would push humanity to its limits. What will they test? Hayun asked. Can you tell me that much? The Guardian hesitated. It could not reveal specific details without invalidating the test. But it could provide general guidance. The hostile entities would present an impossible problem. A challenge that required deep understanding of temporal mechanics combined with creative thinking. Pure logic would not be enough. Neither would pure intuition. Success required both, perfectly balanced, and if we fail, Hayun had to ask. The Guardian's eyes dimmed. Failure would mean humanity was deemed too dangerous to continue developing. The hostile entities would act to prevent further advancement. They would not destroy Earth directly. That would be too obvious, too crude. Instead, they would create barriers in the temporal dimensions around Earth. Barriers that would prevent humanity from ever accessing higher physics again. Humanity would be locked into their current level of technology forever, a species trapped, never allowed to reach its potential. Hayun felt cold horror at that image. A future where humanity could see the stars but never reach them. Could understand that greater mysteries existed but never explore them. Forever knowing that something more was out there but being prevented from accessing it. It would be a different kind of extinction. Not physical death, but the death of possibility. We will not fail, Hayun said firmly. Tell me honestly, do you truly believe we can pass this test? The Guardian's eyes blazed bright again. Yes, it believed. The Guardians had watched humanity for thousands of years. They had seen humans overcome impossible challenges again and again. Humans were stubborn. Humans were creative. Humans refused to accept limitations. Those qualities would be crucial in the coming test. More than that, humans had something unique. They combined logical thinking with emotional intuition in ways no other species managed. They could be coldly analytical and wildly creative in the same moment. That combination, that balance, was exactly what the test would require. 4 days, Hayun said. In 4 days we will show them what humanity can do. The Guardian sent a surge of confidence and approval. Then it faded away and time resumed its normal flow. Hayun stood alone in the laboratory, but she did not feel alone. Billions of humans were with her, all working together, all hoping together, all betting their future on the belief that humanity deserved its place among the stars. She returned to her equations with renewed determination. 4 days. They would use every minute, and when the hostile entities arrived, they would find humanity ready, not perfect perhaps, but determined, clever, and absolutely refusing to give up without a fight. That was the human way. That was what would save them. The day arrived with clear skies over Seoul. Hayun stood in the laboratory with her team, all of them exhausted but alert. Scientists around the world were at their stations, connected through secure networks. Governments had been briefed. Military forces were on standby. Though everyone knew conventional weapons would be useless against entities that existed outside normal time, the temporal sensors began registering massive disturbances at exactly noon. Hayun watched the readings spike across her screens. Something enormous was crossing the boundary between dimensions. The hostile entities were here. Then time stopped, not slowly like before, but instantly. One moment the world was moving, the next it was frozen solid. Hayun and her team could still move, still breathe. The temporal training they had undergone allowed them to function in stop time. But it was disorienting nonetheless. They appeared in the sky above the laboratory. 3 massive beings made of pure energy. They had no fixed form, constantly shifting between shapes. Sometimes they looked vaguely humanoid. Other times they resembled abstract geometric patterns. They glowed with colors that should not exist, hues that hurt to perceive. The entities did not speak with words or even mathematical concepts like the Guardian. Instead, they projected raw information directly into the minds of every scientist on Earth who was trained to perceive temporal dimensions. Thousands of people across the planet received the same message simultaneously. The message was simple and terrifying. Humanity had accessed knowledge beyond its understanding. This could not be tolerated, but the entities were not entirely cruel. They would give humans one chance, solve an impossible problem, and humanity would be permitted to continue its development. Fail, and Earth would be sealed off from higher physics forever. Then the problem appeared, not written down, but existing as a pure mathematical construct in the minds of every human observer. It was an equation, but unlike any equation Hayun had ever encountered. It seemed to fold in on itself, creating paradoxes that should not be possible. Parts of it existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Solving it required understanding not just temporal mechanics, but the deeper nature of reality itself. Hayun stared at the impossible problem. Her first instinct was panic. This was far beyond anything they had prepared for. But then she took a deep breath and forced herself to think. Panic would not help. Only careful thought would help now. Around the world, scientists began working. In laboratories and universities and research centers, the best minds humanity had ever produced focused on the challenge. They worked individually and in groups, approaching the problem from every possible angle. Time was stopped, which meant they had as long as they needed. But the pressure was immense nonetheless. Hours passed in the frozen moment. Hayun filled pages with calculations. Jiwon worked beside her, checking her math and offering suggestions. Doyen focused on the temporal aspects of the equation. Heejin examined the quantum mechanics involved. Junhyo brought his decades of experience to bear on the theoretical foundations. They made progress, but slowly. The equation fought back against every attempt to solve it. Traditional mathematical approaches failed. Pure logic led to contradictions. Hayun felt frustration building. They were missing something, some key insight that would make everything else make sense. Then Doyen made an observation. This equation, he said slowly, it is not just mathematical. There is an artistic element to it. See how this part here creates symmetry that serves no logical purpose? It is beautiful but unnecessary for the actual solution. Hayun looked where he pointed. He was right. Parts of the equation were aesthetically pleasing in ways that had nothing to do with function. That was strange. Why would an impossible problem contain artistic elements? Unless the test was not just about solving the equation. Unless it was about understanding why the equation existed in its specific form. The hostile entities were not just testing mathematical ability. They were testing whether humans could see beyond pure logic, whether they could appreciate that reality itself had an aesthetic component. That is it, Hayun breathed. The Guardian said we needed both logic and intuition. This equation requires us to think like artists as well as scientists. We need to solve it in a way that is not just correct but elegant. She shared this insight across the network. Scientists worldwide began approaching the problem differently. Instead of fighting against the paradoxes, they embraced them. Instead of seeking the most efficient solution, they looked for the most beautiful one. Mathematics and art merged together in ways that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. Hayun felt something shift in her mind. The equation was transforming, becoming clear. She could see the solution now. Not just one solution, but many possible solutions arranged in a pattern. And the pattern itself was the real answer. The test was not about finding a single correct response. It was about understanding that reality allowed for multiple valid approaches, each with its own beauty. Her hands flew across the paper, writing equations that merged quantum mechanics with poetry, temporal dynamics with music theory, hard physics with soft philosophy. It should not work. By all logical rules, it should be nonsense, but somehow, impossibly, it was perfect. Around the world, other scientists reached similar conclusions through different paths. A researcher in Brazil found a solution based on natural patterns. A team in India discovered an answer hidden in ancient mathematical texts. Chinese scientists approached it through traditional philosophy merged with modern physics. Each solution was unique, but all were valid. All were beautiful. Hayun stood up and projected her solution toward the hostile entities. At the same moment, thousands of other scientists did the same. All their solutions flew upward together, a chorus of human creativity and intelligence. Different approaches, different methods, but all reaching toward the same fundamental truth. The three energy beings absorbed the solutions. For a long moment, nothing happened. Hayun held her breath. Had they succeeded? Or had they misunderstood the test entirely? Then the entities changed. Their hostile, threatening presence softened. They sent new emotions into the minds of the watching humans. Surprise, respect, and something that might have been pleasure. Humanity had not just solved the problem. They had exceeded expectations. Most species that faced this test found only one or two solutions after decades of work. Humanity had found hundreds in a matter of hours, and every solution showed not just intelligence but wisdom, not just calculation but understanding. The entities sent one final message. Humanity had passed the test. More than passed. They had proven themselves exceptional. Earth was now under the protection of the Temporal Alliance. The hostile entities would report to the greater cosmic community that humanity was worthy of advancement. The barriers would not be imposed. The future remained open. Then they were gone, vanishing back into the higher dimensions. Time resumed its normal flow. Around the world, humans who had been frozen began moving again, completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. Only the scientists who had participated in the test knew what had occurred. Only they understood how close humanity had come to having its future stolen away. In the Seoul laboratory, Hayun collapsed into a chair. Relief flooded through her so intensely that tears came to her eyes. They had done it. Against impossible odds, humanity had proven itself. They had earned their place among the stars. Jiwon was laughing and crying at the same time. Doyoon sat on the floor, stunned. Hyejin had her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Yunyo simply smiled, a tired but satisfied expression on his weathered face. The Guardian appeared one last time, materializing in the laboratory's center. Its golden eyes shone with pride and joy. It had been right to trust humanity. It had been right to believe in human potential. The species that had seemed so young and primitive just 2 years ago had proven themselves worthy of joining the cosmic community. Hayun stood to face the Guardian. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing in us, for giving us a chance." The Guardian sent warm feelings of approval and affection. It had not given humanity anything they did not already possess. It had simply revealed what was already there. The creativity, the determination, the unique combination of logic and intuition, those were human traits. The Guardian had only helped humanity see its own potential. Now the real work would begin. Humanity was invited to join the Temporal Alliance, a coalition of species that worked together across dimensions. Earth would have access to knowledge accumulated over millions of years. Human scientists would collaborate with beings from countless worlds. The universe was opening up in ways that would have seemed impossible just months before. But with opportunity came responsibility. Humanity would need to continue growing, continue learning. There would be new challenges ahead, new tests to face. The hostile entities had been satisfied, but they would be watching. Any sign that humanity was becoming dangerous or destructive would bring consequences. Ha-Yun understood. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. The first chapter of humanity's cosmic story. They had proven they could handle the knowledge of temporal mechanics. Now they needed to prove they could use that knowledge wisely